So we are here to talk about the risk and opportunity of Chinese business when you are selling in USA. So this is something that is very trendy, unfortunately. A little bit about myself. So I'm Fabien Gaussorgues, as Jane was saying. I've been 17 years in China on the ground. I have engineering background. I'm CEO of Agilian. So Agilian is a contract manufacturer. 300 people, more than 300 people around Dongguan and Shenzhen, with 130,000 square feet, and mostly focused on electronics. I have also 8 years experience in manufacturing. So we are mostly talking about the tariff today, and I think it's quite good timing with the current situation we have recently with new announcements. So here you can see on the graphic that the tariff has been started with the Trump one and the first term, and they have always been staying there, and of course changing every time Trump is there. But I think the key point to understand is that even with Biden, the tariffs still stay there, and this is something that is going to be a new norm. So it is going to stay there, but with different levels, different use as a weapon, use as a tool, depending on how you want to say it, to manage the economy, and that's US is driving this, but can even be elsewhere as well. As you know, also very recently, so last week we have the ruling from US Supreme Court canceling most of the tariff, reciprocal tariff actually, but then Trump has been replacing this with 15% unilateral tariffs. So that's also changing this. So I didn't have all the slides updated for this yet somehow, but that's a new change. And you can see, sorry, go too far. And we'll explain this a little bit more. But first, about the China-specific situation. So you see the history we had. Actually, this is just Trump 2, like the last current term, since 1 year. Exactly. So we see that it's very unstable and changing all the time. Means that we need to adapt, adjust. So typically when you have 145%, this is very hard to do business in China in that situation. And then recently it was 20%, but moved to 15%. This is, I will explain this a little bit more. This doesn't include the tariff that was set in Trump first term. So it's just the reciprocal and the fentanyl part. This is a map from the New York Wall Street Journal, I think. So that map from that's what it used to be before the ruling. So basically, 1 week ago, that was this situation where are the tariffs? So darker, more tariff typically. So you can see China, but also other places have even higher tariffs than China. And the light color is less tariff. But then with the new tariff situation, then you can see that the green part got less tariff and the orange part got more tariff. So it's totally changed the situation. What was good before is less good. What was bad before is better. And let's make things a little bit more on the same level. Here is a situation from South Asia. So and this is here the Chinese situation is basically the section 301 that was that's still valid from the first term of Trump, and then the new part reciprocal and fentanyl, which is reduced to 15% right now, and then so Vietnam has been reduced, Malaysia also, Taiwan has been staying the same, and India also reduced. So basically all becomes the same. Why before was quite differences, a lot of differences, but still China has this 25% additional tariff. So how to navigate in this tariff situation? What are the options? You probably, if you are here in this call, you probably know some of them. So maybe all, I don't know. So, but let's go through. And so there is the tariff avoidance, so how to mitigate, I would say, to avoid tariff or to reduce them. Supply chain diversification, what's the impact, how to do that. China plus one concept, so if you don't know what it is, I will explain a bit more. And the full decoupling, so Mexico, Colombia, Vietnam, Malaysia, actually, yes, is what to do, what and where to do. Typically, I will not go into too much details here, but it's something we can discuss further later. So the first step is unofficial solutions for tariff risky. So I think some are very commonly known, but it's good to understand those and the impact. So the first one is ship to Vietnam, for example, and Vietnam is an example, it can be India or Malaysia or wherever, to ship to Vietnam and change the labor, like made it to remove the made in China and put a made in Vietnam on it. So of course this is totally illegal, but that's a common way, and some people even mention that publicly, which is very dangerous, I think. Undervalue the goods. So you pay $10 the goods to the factory, and then you import them at $5 in USA. So of course it's not legal as well. Changes classification, arbitrary. When I say arbitrary, is find classification which has exemption, for example, or has a lower tariff. That's in the list of tariff. Actually, there are a lot of exemptions. Not very easy to know, and they are not very publicly publicized. But if you know which one has no tariff, then you can use that. And use what you call Chinese DDP mode. So it's basically something that China, many Chinese forwarders, Chinese companies put in place during Trump term 1 to reduce or avoid the DDP, to avoid the tariff in some ways. All those situations are illegal, and be aware that customs, US Customs, CBP, they know it. You can even find YouTube channels that tell you this and so on. So there's nothing to ignore. And so every time you use those solutions, it's a risk. And the more things are going, the more CBP is going to enforce the rules in different ways. But of course, when it's enforced, they can come back to 1, 2, 3 years before to see if there's any fraudulent actions already started, and those are criminal situations, so you can even end up in jail. And that's also one of the reasons that the US government asked for the importer to be US companies, so they can enforce the company locally, while before a foreign company could be importer. So it's no longer the case. China plus one solution. So China plus one is basically working with China, but finishing outside China, something like that. So something we recommend is so China plus one has different versions, I would say. One thing that we recommend with our clients generally is to do what is more valuable in China. So component sourcing, NPI, so new product development. Early mass productions, small runs, sub-assemblies, testing and certification. Why? Because China is cheaper generally, faster, more integrated. Everything is in like what we are in Agilian in Guangdong. We have everything locally, the lab, the suppliers, and so on. So it makes the supply chain extremely efficient. And then out of China, when the product is mature, when you have a defined production, I would say, when you know that it's going to ramp up, then you can move that out of China and source parts that are locally that are easy. So it can be cartons, for example, but it can be also PCBs sometimes, it can be batteries, and so on. You have, legally speaking, I say you have to do substantial transformation. So here there is a bit of gray zone. Many people will just do packing and or enclosure and so on. I will come back to this in the next in the coming slide. And then shipping the product to USA. To make a made-in substantial transformation, so the made-in is depending on each country, and so when you import in US, you have the made-in rules of US typically, which is not necessarily the same as Vietnam and India. So that's important. The rules are not extremely clear, but substantial transformation is a basic, and definitely doesn't mean screwing or these kind of things or labeling and so, but it means that you need significant machines, I would say, changing the HTS code, so the importing code, and typically making PCBs, for example, or batteries is generally recognized as a substantial transformation. So what does it mean is that most of the time, 40% of the cost outside of China can be enough to put the made in of the another country, assuming that you have a substantial transformation. So that's basically the rules, and of course that includes the manual, the bill of materials, the part, the assembly work, and the margin locally there. And that's and what the impact. For example, here if you have $100 product. You have a 40% tariff for China, so it's 40%, $40 duty. But if you move that in another country, and then it's 15% tariff, so you're basically saving $25. So then the benefit, the overcost of doing this outside China should offset those $25. Should not offset those $25. But, that's kind of basic. Final assembly lead time. So here what is it's about understanding what the impact of the China plus one typically. So because it's not that simple, and you have the assembly in China or sub-assembly sourcing or sub-assembly in China eventually, and then you have to do the final assembly shipping to another country, generally South Asia, can be Mexico, Colombia, and so on as well, but generally South Asia, like Vietnam is very popular those days, but also India, Malaysia, and so on. And then the shipping, the custom clearance, and then the work. Basically, it increases the lead time by 2 to 3 times. And so if you can afford it, it's fine. But then that means that you have inventory of materials stuck for this period of time as well. So this has impact on the cash management. So that's also very important. This is a real case that we actually did on our side. So we have some sub-assemblies in China, and then we send to Penang in Malaysia for final assembly. And so we experimented. So in Shenzhen with assembly plus lead time of component is about 4 to 6 weeks. And then adding the Penang production, we end up with almost close to 2.5 times, at least more. So what does that mean is that if you have 10,000 units, for example, and it costs $60, then the amount is stuck for 2.5 months. So it's basically $1.5 million of cash that you cannot use for something else, or you have to free for this. So that's a challenge typically. So that's important to understand. Manufacturing close to USA. So there are a lot of challenges actually, much more than that. But here is the main one. So the advantages are good for short lead time, of course, assuming that you have all the components from other countries. So this is very positive. Lower MOQ. So generally, yes, depends on the kind of production process, I would say, but generally it's lower MOQ, especially when it's manual assembly. Easier communication, generally it's in English, so that makes things easier. And no tariff, of course, no tariff risk. And I put risk here, so it's no tariff means that because tariffs are changing very regularly at the moment, and so this is always a risk that impacts your bottom line. Even the risk, the tariffs can change when the shipment is ongoing on the sea, so when you cannot do anything basically. Disadvantages: labor cost quite higher. So US is basically 5 to 10 times more than China, and Mexico is already 2 to 3 times. I will come back to this. Limited suppliers ecosystems. You can find suppliers, can find probably all the suppliers you need, but everywhere in the country. So not necessarily in the same city like it can be in China. So the supply chain is much more complex. Lower manufacturing density, same thing basically, and higher tooling and area cost. That's why I think even you want to make a mold in US, generally they buy the mold in China. When to plan for US manufacturing, generally is low volume, high mix. So basically many products with low volume, variations, diversity, and so on. So it makes more sense to manage that lower the inventory as well. When speed and iteration is important. So when you are developing product, new versions, not mature, you need to have different change every month, for example. Then you have a high flexibility that you cannot necessarily have in China, unless you are on site in China, I would say. But the shipping will reduce the flexibility no matter what. And IP protection, I think we all know that. So you keep this in US, and then you are protected at least from Chinese. Something like that. So that's a topic that can be managed more or less, but this is always a risk. So tipping point, we consider like it depends on the type of product, of course, but we consider like 2 to 5,000 pieces per month. That's keeping this in US makes little sense, unless for complex process that are difficult to do in China. Moving production out of China. So what's the impact? It's not as simple as this sounds. So here the graph, you can see the labor cost is the average labor cost for each country between USA, between China, Mexico, Malaysia, Vietnam, and India. So only India is actually lower than China in the South Asian countries. But the impact are more than that. The production lead time is 2.5, 3 times what I explained before. The productivity gap, first 12 months, we estimate in average that we have 30% productivity less until all the processes are mature enough and the workers train and so on. Quality takes about 3 to 6 months to stabilize before you get the same level you had in China. I think there are some good examples with Apple, typically, that manufacture in India, and they have a lot of trouble to align the quality they had in China. Labor cost data ignores the productivity. The key is that here that Chinese workers are extremely efficient compared to South Asian. So when here we have, for example, India is cheaper than in China in terms of labor cost. That's true, but they are less efficient. I think most of the workers, South Asian workers actually are mostly less efficient than in China, so they have a reputation for that. So this increases also the gap, and of course new cultural gap, learning curve. So when you go to Malaysia is a bit similar, I would say, than China. So it's not necessarily and more Western based actually. So not necessarily as big, but Vietnam and India and so on. That's also a new environment. China, USA, what can happen? So you see today that most of the situation, the tension between China and USA are, I would say, up and down. stable and not stable at the same time. And this is so the risk here is that there is full decoupling. Full decoupling means that they are not going to have any trade anymore between China and USA. So typical example is that the Taiwan conflict, a cyber attack or a massive cyber attack or full trade embargoes or things that happen that basically like war and these kind of things that trigger that put them in a position that they cannot do any business together. And this is what China and USA are both preparing with rare earth materials, for example, and so on. The probability is not very high, however, because they both don't have interest to do that, even so they say it. So they are very careful with what they are doing. It's not like in Iran. They can afford. US can afford to be more aggressive, but with China they have to be much more careful. So we estimate 5 to 15%. Very hard to make a prediction here, but that's kind of expectations. The more realistic scenario for 2026 and the next years actually is continuing like this with up and down on some topics. This means that typically parts are restricted. They are already famous, already public, basically. So whatever is related to military, to advanced semiconductors, dual use, the critical infrastructure like 5G, power grid, and so on, AI hardware and surveillance technology, product from PLA, so for military, and robotics as well. So we have a regular situation like this that import export. We have recently robots that have been restricted to ship to Japan, for example. That also, so it's bilateral. Basically, it can be US can have these restrictions, but also China can also add its own restrictions. On the positive side, the parts are unlikely to be covered, to be at risk, I would say, is consumer goods, home appliance, textile, industrial components, and non-sensitive B2B products. So those are out of the scope, and even they get those tariff, they are not responsible. And so the probability is about the same as not the same, the remaining of the other parts, the full decoupling. So this is the last slide before the questions. So this is about the takeaway of this and what to do or how to do. So first is to have a good understanding of your supply chain exposure, how much you use Chinese component typically, how much you can diversify from other country, and having backup. Typically, we work a lot with India, work with Malaysia. So in India, typically we have most of the parts, unless electronics and a few components, most of the part can be found and sourced in India. So we know that some options as backup. So this is part of the work to do to understand your exposure. Diversify intelligently, not reactively. So the tariff is norm, but it is going to stay, but they are going to change. So moving everything to Vietnam, for example, it's a very risky move, not only costly, but also the direction of the tariffs might change, and so oppose the move. So need to be very careful. Need to keep your existing supply chain as much as possible and develop a new one in parallel. It's a much safer situation. Design supply chain, not slogan. So based decision on total cost of ownership, what I explained in the slide. It's important to have an understanding of the full cost and the cash needed for managing this. And the partners with experts who knows the ground. So not talking about myself only, but typically we work with some people do export expert in import in US. So they know which kind of HS code are better, but also legal, can be justified with the customs. And so having the right partners to advise you what is legal, what is not legal, what is the risk level, what is potentially acceptable but still risky. This is something that you have to rely on the experience. That's about it for my presentations. So yeah, now I'm open for your questions. So if you have some questions on Tariff or beyond, let me know. I'm listening.
And I think for these questions, feel free to drop them in the chat to keep it simple. If nobody's talking and you feel like, maybe here we go. We have one right now from Whitney. Speaking of supply chain diversification, how many suppliers do you recommend a business owner have for main product, and what about Italy?
Okay, interesting. So how many suppliers? It depends on the volume of production we are talking about. So if you have Apple, for example, they would generally have 3 suppliers at least to manage one product. But if you have a smaller volume, is costly. More suppliers is both cost and benefit, so you have to be very careful. If you are doing less than 10,000 units, hard to go more than one supplier. But if you have above 10,000 units a month, you can definitely start to work on diversify with at least 2 suppliers, and ideally not in the same country. What about Italy? I would say why not? this, this. Italy, Italy is not a bad country. I think there is not. It depends a bit on the type of product you are doing typically. So Italy is doing some very good product and has good opportunities. So yes, but I mostly focused on here on the South Asian country because we are located in Asia, and for us it's much easier to manage like this. But yes, Italy, we have partners also that works with Colombia. We have with Malaysia and so there's no problem with Italy.
Great. And from Ron, we have, do you do contact manufacturing or assembly in China?
So in China we do contract manufacturing. So we do development, NPI development to mass production. So not only the assembly, we also do plastic injection. We're in-house PCBs and silicon as well. So it's full kit and solutions we have. Next, what do you think about the level of automation in manufacturing in China currently? Well, this is a very interesting question. So again, it would depend on the level of quantities we are talking about. When we are talking about 1,000, 2,000, even 5,000 units a month, the level of automation is generally not very high, because not necessarily because of the cost of automation, but also because you cannot make your chain, your assembly line busy enough. And for automation, you need to have continuous production. So that needs you need decent volume. But right now, as far as I remember from the figure, there is more robots for manufacturing in China than all over the world. And I think it's more than just one time, probably a few times. And I think each year that number of robots is used in China is much higher than anywhere in the world. So China is going very, very fast on this. This basically their next step is automation. They have even some factories without human. A customer came to me and said, "Oh, I want my product without human." But for its volume was not very possible. but for high volume, that's trendy, and the Chinese are very, very pushy for that, especially that the automation manufacturing machines in China are much cheaper than in US typically. Next, currently I found most of my suppliers and purchasing on Alibaba through this. Yes, not sure what the question this, but yeah, Alibaba is of course a source. Huh? That's not generally the best suppliers. It's Alibaba. You will find generally suppliers that are more for export. So when you build a local supply chain, they are not necessarily the best solution. Typically on our side, we have suppliers. We found suppliers all around our factory, and that makes the supply chain extremely flexible, reactive, and that's a value. In Alibaba, they are everywhere in China, so it's more complicated, but they are good suppliers anyway. How has system like fictive and symmetry affect your business? This I'm not sure. Oh no, do you know this?
I'm not sure now. Maybe if the person who has this maybe can explain or maybe
no problem. This is Shane. Those are like US-based companies where you put your 3D model there and they kind of do the full turnkey solution. So I'm just wondering if they're eating any of your business, but it sounds like not, if you're not familiar with them. Yeah, they're you put your 3D file there and they give you an AI version of a quote, So doing the same as what you're doing, but trying to automate it basically.
Yeah, so yeah, I know some companies doing this, not those.
Yeah, okay, no problem. And thank you for all the information, but it was very interesting, Fabien. Thank you for that presentation. Appreciate it.
Most welcome. Yeah, yeah. So I know this system. This is coming in China, not us, not yet at least. But for PCBs, for example, you have famous companies like JFC PCBs and so on that do almost like this typically. For mechanical part and so on, I don't know anyone doing this in China at the moment, but for sure that will come. That will come sooner. But we have, I think in US also there are some companies that are aggregator of suppliers. So you provide the design, and they will provide the quotation from different suppliers automatically or semi-automatically, I would say.
Yeah, correct.
So that also this kind of system, yeah. Okay, next question, since the tariffs are variable, how much money or what percentage of revenue do you recommend a business owner plan for this cost as things evolve and change regularly? This is a good question. So it depends on the margin you have on your product, I have to say, and it's risk management. So if I take the example of the tariff moving to 145% in last August, I think, and if the tariff have been staying like this, that would have kept a lot of businesses, right? So it's not necessarily. It's hard to give a recommendation on this. It's about what kind of risk level we accept to do that, and so how much we want to invest to remove the risk. So if you are considering, for example, that the tariff might become unbearable, there's 50% chance that it become unbearable, then you better spend the money you need for this, I would say, no matter the cost. So that will almost be my answer. But I think this is not necessarily about matter of cost recommendation. My recommendation would be what I said in the previous slide. It's more like first understand your impact. Try to spend some time to understand the supply chain in another country. See what would be the cost of doing the business over there. Ask some quotation, and so be prepared, I would say, for this. So when you have to move, you can save 3 months or more just by doing this. So that will be more my recommendation. And And for some customers, I said what I said also is that they work with two suppliers or China plus one suppliers. For Europe or rest of the world, they will use the Chinese supply chain, and for US, they will use the Indian or Malaysian supply chain, for example. And that's also a way to diversify and limit your risk and the cost as well, because the impact of the benefit of the moving to the second country will offset the tariff, will be offset by the tariff.
Right. This is Whitney. I want to thank you personally for all your answers in this presentation. Thank you.
And welcome. Thanks for you too. Then we saw next questions from Kirk. We saw pre-COVID migration of suppliers from coastal industrial to inland in China to maintain the low labor rates. The trend continues. Yes, the trend is still continuing on this, definitely. Not very high, I would say, but we see regularly. I have some employees that come typically from companies that move away. There is a trend also in China is that the workers are less migrating than they used to be. They like to work in their hometown, and so that's also one of the reasons for this. So they are they can afford, basically. They have some capability to do that, and so that's one of the reasons for this. Lower labor rate, yes, definitively, but I need to understand also that the efficiency is lower. Supply chain is not as efficient as you have in the coastal cities. So there is a balance here. See, if you have a very big company, yeah, definitely it's worth it. If you have small companies, small quantities, that's it's a little bit like moving to another country somehow. And do you see that demand for capacity in China drives this? No, not at all. That's not the reason. No impact for this.
Fabien, if I could just follow up, this is Kirk. So, pre-COVID, we did see a lot of this inland pressure. So I think some of it was from the government, and some of it was based on the need to kind of stop this grand migration that happens every year with the transitory workers. But I wonder what, like, the overall demand in China. I believe that it has reduced, but maybe I'm not correct on that. And if that's the case, then there's really not a need to continue investing in adding capacity and drive inland. So I'm just wondering, the overall picture in China, what is happening with the manufacturing base? Is it still, you seem to say that it continues to move, but it's not because of capacity. So, like, how are they paying for this added capacity? Are they relocating? And I'm just interested in the kind of larger picture. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I understand that, and that it's very hard. In China, it's very hard to get really trustworthy figures, I would say. So I can only tell what I see. So definitely, there is a trend, but it's not a big trend. The key is that locations like around Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Dongguan, even the labor skills are increasing, and so there is a migration which is more like with less skilled labor, and so you have more skilled people, especially in Shenzhen. It's getting more and more difficult to find basic factories, like textile, for example, and so on in Shenzhen. Than it used to be. But you can find high-tech companies more and more, like Huawei, ZTE, and so on, Xiaomi, and so on. And this is a trend, definitely a trend you have in Shenzhen, Dongguan area. And so this, and when you move to more labor-intensive manufacturing, then those are the ones that's going to move to inland place. So it's not really.
I'm sorry, Fabien, to interrupt you. So do you see it mostly based on local Chinese companies? You said, you mentioned Huawei. Is it Is it driven by Western or foreign demand, or is it driven by internal demand?
So moving, for me, for what I see, I would say the demand is more or less stable somehow. So we have there are some rumors, I would say, on the economy that's less export and so on, but the figures are showing the opposite. Actually, still 5% growth of the export and so on. So the demand didn't really change much. There is no real pressure from what I saw. From Western demand, Western customers and so on, to go more inland, to lower, actually even to, I would say, to lower the labor cost. It's of course, when you have a big company like automotive, for example, and so on, they mostly move inland. But we don't see this as a pressure. It's more natural trend, I would say. As you said, also government have been pushing this to reduce the migration, and that's. But yeah, I don't see this as an effort, I would say, from as an impact from the capacity and so on. I don't know, Renaud, if you have some other view on this.
I would say it's a variety of things. It's Chinese business owners maybe get a good deal in their home province. They can own the land for a much lower price than it would be, for example, in Shenzhen. Maybe they're really tired of always fighting to hire people, and they see the wages going up every year. So it feels much easier to open something in Jiangxi or in Hunan or some places like this inland, where there's a pool of labor that is available and that is cheaper, right? So there's a lot of that. It's usually Chinese business owners that drive this, not Western companies, not so much. I don't remember seeing that ever, right? But yeah, also Chinese government wants to develop the inland provinces in the west also, right? They don't want to have all the wealth in the east along the sea, along the coast, and then have very poor provinces in the inland, right? So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the insight. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Most welcome. And so next from Mathieu, for hardware company with strong IP sensitivity, and that is about to enter NPI phase in the first product. What key factors should it consider when evaluating the feasibility of conducting NPI in China, and how can we mitigate IP risk? Is it not the case of going China for this process? Yeah. So this is a very good question. It's always difficult to answer. Is a lot our experience is that Chinese companies, competitors, I would say, or so on, don't care too much about your product as long as there is not a lot of traction or a lot of demand. So generally at this stage, they want to see, they are not very interested on your product, on NPI phase, on development. They want to see how it goes. That said, when you work with a competitor, and that's mistakes that many companies are doing, is to work with a competitor. So, for example, you are doing a vacuum cleaner and you want to innovative vacuum cleaner, and you want to work with a company doing vacuum cleaner. They have a huge incentive to reuse your technology in their own product, and worse than that, they have incentive also to slow down your development to have their product on the market sooner than yours. And this is something I've been seeing also with multiple cases. So it's more about a strategy here, not about having patents, copyright, and so on during NPI stage. It's not necessarily very useful. It's useful when you start to have attraction, when you have demand, when you have a very successful Kickstarter, for example, when you are publicly famous on the product, then definitively you need to be very careful. And it's better, in that case, it's better to work with a factory that doesn't sell some products than you. So it doesn't have incentive to, not incentive, but also doesn't have trader distributors that do this kind of product. So they are less likely to be, and they are more interested in doing business with you than copying you. Next question. So from Shane, I'm correct to say that Chinese labor rate has not increased a lot in the past 10 years. Yes, it's an interesting point. It's what actually the minimum rate has been increasing every year. It's increasing systematically every year in Shenzhen, Dongguan, and almost everywhere in China. However, you cannot hire workers at the minimum rate. It's basically the actual labor cost is set by the demand, offer and demand of the workers, and so the workers are paid much higher than the minimum rate. I mean, much significantly higher. So, for example, I think Shenzhen is around 2,100 RMB per month. I think the minimum, something like that. And but average workers you will get in Shenzhen would be over 5,000 to 5,000 or 6,000 RMB per month, so well above the minimum. So this balance has been demand offer is managed by the market typically, and this didn't change in the past 10 years more or less. That's the reason.
But still, the wages themselves have been going up. The real wages paid by manufacturers.
Yes.
The office employees, engineers, and some management has been increased a lot. In 10 years, however. Yes. Next question from Ron. The hardest things I did last year was arranging shipping from China. Other experiences, but I can ask others. But yes, I cannot agree more. This is the minimum between the COVID and the tariffs. There are many reasons making the shipping very difficult. Right now we have a lot of inspection in US. So in US is inspecting a lot of shipments, making delays, additional cost, and troubles as well, especially when you have your shipment mixed, like LCL, mixed with some other product that you cannot control. So maybe sensitive products that it will have a face inspection. So it makes the shipment quite unpredictable. So yes, I don't know if others want to share their experience, but yes, for us it's definitely trouble. Okay. Yes. So thanks for the Whitney for the feedback for the IP. And that's it. No more questions then. Anyone want to have still something you want to know on China or tariff and supply chain? Okay. So Agilian Technology is a contract manufacturer, as mentioned before. So we created actually Agilian Technology based on the problem we have with the manufacturer. So we were frustrated, I would say, with all the difficulties, and so it was created 8 years ago and has been developing well. So we are well vertically integrated, so to have better control on the process and the quality, and also have being able to explain what are the risks of every decisions. And so we follow, as I say, we are more than 350 people, and we are very engineering based. We have more than 40 engineers. That's for product development, but also for NPI process, DFM, design for manufacturing, following tooling, solving problems. And they are very close from the production. So that makes things very flexible, very reactive. We also have plastic injection, silicon, and PCB in house. So that makes most very effective for electronic products. and we are ISO certified, and we work with many different type of products. So we have quite a wide experience, and Renaud shared the link. But yes, you are welcome to ask more specific questions. And do you think from Abid, do you think the tariff will be refunded? Yes. Do you think that will be refunded after they made illegal by the Supreme Court? So technically it should, but I don't believe it. I think this is Trump said it already that he's going to make it very difficult. And knowing Trump, you can be confident that it's going to be very difficult. Maybe after Trump left eventually, if he leaves, that's maybe. But I know there is FedEx. FedEx asked you Trump administration to get some tariff back. I think it would be a good case to see. But as the individual or small buyer, small importers, I don't think so. I think this is unfortunately need a miracle here.
The lawyers are going to get very, very busy.
Yeah, well, they're already very busy with Trump anyway. That's. Thanks, Mathieu. Okay, but I think there's no more questions. I think we are good to go. It's 1 hour anyway, so it's in time frame. So thank you all for your question and participation. We appreciate it. Good to have this interaction. Very interesting. And so yeah, we will probably do this webinar again on some new with next Trump policy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you all then. Have a good day, good evening, wherever you are.